Rolling through the desert country of the American Southwest, a Union Pacific stack train is on an eastbound journey between Tucson and El Paso. This 300-mile district through southern Arizona and New Mexico is part of the legendary Southern Pacific's Sunset Route and is known as the Lordsburg Sub. This double-track main line connects ports in Southern California with eastern destinations like New Orleans, Chicago, and Houston, as well as south of the border into Mexico. In part one of this two-part series, we will cover the western half of the Lordsburg Sub between Tucson and Steins, just over the New Mexico state line. Trains must crest 4 different grades, including Mescal, Dragoon, Railroad Pass, and Steins Pass, west of Lordsburg. Monster stack trains make up a good portion of traffic on the Lordsburg Sub, some of which are well over 3 miles in length. In addition to stacks, mixed manifest and unit grain trains make a regular appearance. And Amtrak's Sunset Limited makes a tri-weekly run over the line. In addition to mainline traffic, we will visit the San Pedro Valley Railroad at Benson, Arizona, and the Arizona and Eastern, which serves a large Morenci copper mine near Clifton. This is Union Pacific's Lordsburg Subdivision, Part 1. Part of Union Pacific's Sunset area, the Lordsburg Subdivision runs for 311 miles between Tucson and El Paso. The entire route is double-tracked with a ruling grade of 1.49%, although there are a couple of short segments where the grade momentarily exceeds 2%. Most of today's journey is through southern Arizona, with the Lordsburg Subdivision officially beginning at 36th Street at the east end of Tucson Yard, milepost 987.7. Just east of the Vail crossovers, the two main tracks take separate grades up to the first summit of Mescal. Main 2 follows the original SP alignment along the course of Cienega Creek, while Main 1 utilizes the El Paso and Southwestern grade, which was built later into Tucson. It flies over the SP at what was once known as Irene, but today is simply called Cienega Creek. After meeting up at Mescal, the two main lines drop down through Chamizo to the town of Benson, located in the San Pedro Valley. This is where we find the old junction with the Arizona and Southeastern Railroad out of Bisbee, dating back to 1888. Today, the northern end of the line is still operated by the San Pedro Valley Railroad to a customer in Curtis. After crossing the San Pedro River, trains begin the climb up to Dragoon Summit on a grade that reaches 2% near Fenner. The tracks loop through Sibyl, and the grade backs off to 1.8% through Tully before reaching the second summit at Dragoon. The line then drops toward the Sulphur Springs Valley, passing Apache, named for the nearby Apache Generation Station. Coal trains still service the station, and we will see a unit train off the BNSF in New Mexico delivering coal to the facility. Continuing east, the main lines cross a dry lake into Wilcox and top the third summit of what is known as Railroad Pass near Raso. At Bowie, we meet up with the Arizona and Eastern, which operates a branch line northwest to Miami, Arizona. The AZER also has trackage rights over the UP as far as Lordsburg. East of Bowie, the railroad begins yet another climb toward the New Mexico state line, passing Karro, Van Nar, and Cavett before reaching the summit at Steins, milepost 1129.7. We begin in the city of Tucson, the oldest incorporated city in Arizona, which began life as a Spanish fort in 1775. It was later part of the Mexican state of Sonora from 1821 to 1854. Afterward, it became the capital of the new Arizona Territory of the U.S. and had the largest population in that territory until Phoenix surpassed it in 1920. Today, Tucson boasts a population of over 500,000 within the city and over 1 million in the metro area. It is by no means an accident that the historic Southern Pacific's Sunset Route passes right through town. An eastbound empty grain shuttle passes the historic Tucson Station and Museum as it nears the east end of the Gila subdivision. The grain train slows as it approaches Tucson Yard. It will change crews before continuing its eastward journey over the Lordsburg Sub. Tucson was an important stop on the historic Cook's Wagon Road to California during the gold rush of 1849. Later, it was a stage stop on the San Antonio-San Diego Mail Line and division headquarters for the Butterfield Overland Mail Line. However, multiple attacks by Apache Indians permanently ended the stage's operations in 1861. The old Western tales of gunfighters, train robbers, cowboys, and Indians that became popular in American literature and movies were based on real events, one of which happened right here. A sculpture of Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday stand guard outside the Southern Arizona Transportation Museum. It was here on March 20th, 1882, that Earp killed outlaw Frank Stilwell for the murder of Wyatt's brother, Morgan Earp, 2 days earlier in Tombstone. The first Southern Pacific train stopped in Tucson exactly 2 years earlier, on March 20th, 1880. This depot was built in 1907 by the Southern Pacific and served 4 trains per day in each direction, including the Sunset Limited, Argonaut, Imperial, and Golden State. The city purchased the depot in 1998 and restored it to its 1941 Spanish colonial revival appearance in 2004. It still serves Amtrak's tri-weekly Sunset Limited Texas Eagle, which we will see a few times as we journey across the Lordsburg Sub. The Lordsburg Subdivision officially begins at 36th Street, the east end of Tucson Yard, milepost 987.7. UP 7295 has just made a crew change as it begins its 310-mile trip to El Paso. The 2.5-mile-long stack train consisting of marine and domestic containers departs Tucson Yard on the north track, which is Main 1. Behind it, a second train enters the yard where it'll change crews and add fuel to one of its engines before continuing east. The grade for eastbounds here is around 1%. This train originated in Long Beach, California, and is bound for Dallas, Texas. It carries the symbol ILBDI. Like many stack trains running on this territory, it has 2 additional remote-controlled DPUs mid-train. DPU refers to distributed power throughout the train, rather than adding all the locomotives to the head end. This is for better handling of today's longer and heavier trains. The Lordsburg Subdivision is currently a double-track mainline with crossovers at intervals across the entire route. The first set of crossovers is found at Vail, milepost 1000. UP 6454 leads a Long Beach to Houston stack train east. At Vail, an interesting thing happens to mains 1 and 2. Right at the crossover at milepost 1000.0, the 2 mains switch. The north track, main 1, becomes main 2, and the south track, main 2, becomes main 1. This is because the 2 grades separate just east of the crossovers, and in 8 miles, main 1 will fly over main 2 at Cienega Creek. I-trains like this one are lower priority stack trains, and to save on fuel costs, often have just enough power to get over the road. Track speed at Vail is 70 for freight. However, this eastbound was clocked by a nearby detector at 18 miles per hour. As expected, 2 more diesels are working mid-train as it slowly crawls up the 1% grade. An alarming new trend on stack trains are containers that have been broken into by thieves looking for high-dollar items to steal. Our film crew saw several stack trains with open containers like this Ocean Network Express that appears to be filled with floor jacks. Probably not what the criminals were looking for, but the open container does pose a danger to anyone trackside if any of the contents were to spill out. An old brickworks is located not far from the Vail crossovers. Although bricks are no longer made here, the old factory has been repurposed as a paintball course. Eastbound Amtrak number 2, the Sunset Limited, passes Vail on a rainy spring morning. It was on time out of Tucson at 8:15 a.m. In late March and early April 2024, a series of rainstorms slowly moved across the southwest. The dark gray clouds and flat lighting weren't exactly the conditions we were wanting to shoot in, but the desert still has a charm to it, even under moody skies. Just east of the Vail crossovers, mains 1 and 2 begin to go their separate ways. Right at the split is a sign telling train crews to switch their radio frequency to the proper road channel. For eastbounds, the channel is FRA Channel 8 for both receive and transmit. That is why the number 8 appears twice. Star 65 is for toning up the dispatcher. Looking the other way, westbound crews changed to Channel 14 with the same Star 65 to call the dispatcher. UP 5288 takes a manifest train east on Main 1, which is now the South Track. Right behind the manifest, UP 6789 leads an autorack train out of Miraloma, California for Eagle Pass, Texas. It is symboled the AMLEG. The rain beats down as the rack train continues east, bringing another soggy day of rail fanning in the American Southwest to a close. The next morning has the promise of better weather, and UP has a surprise for us on this eastbound stack train. The second engine is UP Heritage Unit number 1995, honoring the Chicago and Northwestern. It really looks sharp in the morning light. A westbound manifest waits on Main 2 for a chance to get into the busy Tucson yard this morning. The westbound finally gets a signal into the yard as our eastbound continues towards Cienega Creek. What a difference a day makes as the clouds finally begin to break up over the southern Arizona desert. UP Dispatcher 242 has been working hard to hang a green at Vail for a westbound Z, which is approaching us at 68 miles per hour on the number 1 track. Right behind the Z, UP 7664 takes a local back to Tucson. The reason the tracks run on two different grades is because they were built by two different railroads. East of Vail, the track we are now referring to as Main 2 is the original Southern Pacific Main Line, while Main 1 was built by the El Paso and Southwestern, which ran from Tucumcari, New Mexico, south to El Paso, and then west to Tucson. The railroad was purchased by the SP in 1924, and the paralleling track became the second main line. At Cienega Creek, the old El Paso and Southwestern flies over the SP, which winds through a narrow canyon. UP 8325 is westbound on the old SP number 2 track. The railroad crossing at Cienega Creek is inside of a preserve, offering great views of the desert landscape and one man-made attraction, the Aqua Verde Castle. Built in the 1970s, the private residence with an incredible view is a local landmark that can be seen for miles. UP 8347 leads eastbound train ILCG2 over Cienega Creek on Main 1, which again becomes the North Track. The engineer enthusiastically acknowledges the camera crew. The El Paso and Southwestern's Tucson extension was completed by 1912. The railroad decided not to follow the SP's slow and windy path through the narrow canyon, which had a history of flash floods. Instead, a faster northerly route was chosen. It required flying over the SP at two locations, Mescal and here at Irene. The train continues east toward Mescal as another day of rail fanning draws to a close. Cienega Creek is one of the highlights of the route, and we decided to spend more time covering the action here. UP 8511 is westbound on Main 1. The Arch Cienega Highway Bridge was originally part of U.S. Route 80 when it was constructed in 1921. This was a major transcontinental highway until 1956. In between trains, we enjoy a pleasant spring morning in the desert. UP 8627 East is in charge of train ILBHO, a 3-mile-long Long Beach to Houston stacker. The train works up the canyon on the number 2 main. This vantage point really helps illustrate the length of these stack trains. GE AC 4400CW number 9792 and a 6044AC number 6923 serve as mid-train remotes. We return our attention to the Cienega Creek Bridge, hoping for an over-under shot. UP 7656 takes domestic stacks west on Main 1. Track speed on Main 1 is reduced to 50 at the flyover, while trains following the Cienega Wash on Main 2 are restricted to 25 miles per hour. A slower moving eastbound led by UP 8127 completes the shot just in time. As the train continues east through the Cienega Creek Preserve, it passes the old ghost town of Pantano. The prominent structure still standing is an old SP water tank, just to the north of the present-day main line. And a little north of that tank are the remains of the town that once boasted a population of 500 during its heyday in the early 1920s. Like the railroad, the town dates back to 1880, although the original Pantano station was built on the south side of the creek. After a flood in 1887, the town site was moved to this location, where it served the railroad into the mid-1950s. Many towns planted by the railroad across America grew into bustling, thriving cities with names like Cheyenne, Denver, Dodge City, Billings, and Spokane. Many others, like Pantano, passed like a shadow of a cloud over the desert floor. The clatter of a busy street replaced with a hushed whisper of a desert breeze. Of course, the railroad is still here. UP 5986 leads a westbound work train through the old ghost town. a UP track gang is on the move west. With over 32,000 miles of track on the UP system, there is always work to be done. Following suit, UP 7837 takes a stacked train past the Pantano water tank. SD70 Ace number 8798 is in dynamics as it works by remote control mid-train. Before the sun sets, let's get just a little farther east. A green signal tells us another westbound is being routed down the creek on Main 2. Amtrak train number 1, the westbound Sunset Limited, enters a section of tangent track known as the Ogie Cutoff on its tri-weekly run over the Sunset route. Combined with the Texas Eagle out of Chicago, the train races between stops at Benson and Tucson. Interstate 10 loosely parallels the Lordsburg Sub, but stays considerably south of the railroad as it nears Tucson. Located near milepost 1018 on Main 2 west of Mescal, the Ogie Cutoff is a section of track that has been realigned in recent years, eliminating a fairly tight curve in the process. The older alignment is now a 4.7-mile-long set-out track that is used for storage and appears as Pantano on the current timetable, milepost 1017.8. Currently, a couple miles of spine cars are calling it home. At Ogie Junction, we can see another eastbound working upgrade on the number 1 track. Both mains come back together at Mescal, around 5 miles to the east. The stack train continues to climb toward the summit at Mescal, while a westbound grain train led by UP 8311 glides down around a curve at milepost 1018 and on to the Ogie Cutoff. UP 2593 leads an eastbound rack train up to the summit at Mescal on the number 2 track. The train meets UP 8043 West, which is just reaching the top of the 1.78% grade out of Benson on Main 1. The two grades come back together at milepost 1023. Before the double track east of here was completed, this was known as Mescal Junction. Notice the milepost conversion sign where the two grades meet. 1021.63 on Main 1 and 1021.87 on Main 2 both become 1023, just west of the Mescal crossovers. Mescal is control point CPS 1023 for both main tracks, and an eastbound stack train led by UP 7978 climbs the remaining 1.13% grade to the summit at an elevation of 4,085 feet above sea level. An old water tank is pretty much all that is left of the railroad town that once existed at Mescal Summit, the first of 3 summits on the railroad between Tucson and Lordsburg. A quick look reveals a similar story to the ghost town of Pantano, although these ruins don't appear to be as old. Actually, the community of Mescal still exists to the south, closer to Interstate 10. Similar to the flyover at Cienega Creek, the El Paso and Southwestern line once flew over the Southern Pacific just east of Summit on a 204-foot steel bridge. A westbound grain train approaches the location of the old flyover, which was removed by the Southern Pacific after acquiring the EPSW in 1924. That line bypassed Benson to the south and wasn't deemed necessary by the SP. As the westbound crests the summit, the grade veers away from the old SP alignment to join the El Paso and Southwestern. Partially hidden in the brush are the remnants of what appears to have been a grand hotel or depot, with steps leading down to the railroad grade. We wonder at the many people who walked these steps to catch a train west for California or east for Texas. A diverging clear tells us there is a California-bound train approaching on Main 2, and it'll be crossing over to Main 1. NS 9969 and 2 of its sister units help power the westbound stack train. Another westbound grain train climbs the grade out of Benson between Chamizo and Mescal. It'll be utilizing the old SP grade along Cienega Creek. After cresting the summit at Mescal, trains drop down through Chamizo to a crossing of the San Pedro River at Benson, before tackling the next climb to Dragoon. UP 6739 West takes a run at the 1.7% grade as it passes through downtown Benson. By the time the mid-train DPU approaches, the train is already feeling the effect of the grade. The name Benson only appears as a set-out track for Main 2 on the current UP timetable, but the town's roots are firmly established with the Southern Pacific. Founded in 1880 as the SP built east from California, Benson was the chosen site for the railroad's crossing of the San Pedro River. It was named for Judge William S. Benson, a friend of SP President Charles Crocker. The town served as a rail junction for ore mines at nearby Tombstone, Fairbank, Contention City, and Bisbee. That junction still exists today, operated by the San Pedro Valley Railroad, formerly the San Pedro and Southwestern. This line dates back to 1888, when the Arizona and Southeastern built a 60-mile branch line along the San Pedro River between Benson and the mining town of Bisbee. Today, the SPVR runs just 7 miles to Curtis. A pair of former Santa Fe GP30s power the train. The 2408 was built in May of 1962 as ATSF 1208, and the 2426 was built in June of that same year as the 1226. Both units still carry the name of the former San Pedro and Southwestern. With their train made up, the SPVR crew prepares to head for Curtis. After stopping at the crew office, the train is on its way. The decorative steam engine by the office is actually a barbecue grill. Pretty clever idea. Railroad services Apache nitrogen products in Curtis. The company makes explosives for the mining industry. The tank cars wear the placard 2426, which is liquid ammonium nitrate. The hoppers with the placard 1942 carry ammonium nitrate in a crystalline salt form. Returning to the UP main line, eastbound Amtrak number 2 heads through Benson and over the San Pedro River toward its next stop at Lordsburg. East of Benson, trains dig in for a 2% grade that twists and curves toward a crossing of the Dragoon Mountains, which form the eastern border of the San Pedro Valley. These signals stand sentinel over the crossovers at Fenner, CPS 1035. In the distance, a westbound manifest led by UP 6898 chases the setting sun into Benson on the number 1 track. At this point, the train has just passed the next set of crossovers to the east at Sibyl. In the last seconds of sunlight, UP 6898 rolls over the crossovers at Fenner. The mountains seem to recede as we continue eastward to the crossovers at Sibyl, CPS 1044. A westbound has just come over the pass at Tully and slowly works down to our location in Dynamics. The railroad descends into the San Pedro Valley with a series of big curves. Over the years, some of the wiggles have been straightened, but not by much, keeping the maximum grade between Fenner and Sibyl at a manageable 2.09%. UP 8509 adds dynamic braking to the middle of this long manifest. A third remote-controlled diesel brings up the rear. The summit of Dragoon is located about 5 miles east of the crossovers at Tully, near milepost 1054. The elevation here is 4,632 feet, making this the highest point on the subdivision. UP 7314 lugs a westbound over the top. A cut of 4 Trinity Rail RDLA hoppers are an interesting catch. These cars are designed to carry aggregate, limestone, and the like. Another repainted GE C6044AC leads on the rear drawbar, and soon will be in dynamics as the grade drops down to Benson. Near Apache, UP 7194 leads a westbound upgrade to Dragoon. Continuing east, the railroad begins a 20-mile section of tangent track, ending east of the town of Wilcox. UP 8563 takes a grade train westbound on Main 1 near Apache. The grade is 1.36% as the railroad climbs out of the Wilcox Playa toward Dragoon. The Apache Generation Station is located south of the main line near the community of Cochise. Using a combination of coal and natural gas, the station produces over 600 megawatts of electricity, with an additional 20 megawatts coming from solar. The coal part of the equation is provided by rail, and a short spur connects with the Lordsburg Subdivision at the Apache crossovers, control point CPS 1061. BNSF 7422 slowly approaches the junction on the number 2 track, with loads for the power plant. This coal comes from the El Segundo mine east of Gallup, New Mexico. It connects with the BNSF Transcon at Baca on the Gallup Subdivision. The loads are taken east to Belen, then down to a junction with the Lordsburg Subdivision at Deming. It is then handed over to a UP crew for the final 150-mile trip to Apache. Before the rear of the coal train enters the junction, UP 3027 East passes on Main 1 with a long land barge of overseas containers. The BNSF coal train will wait for a fresh crew before the unloading process begins. Just east of Apache is the old town of Cochise. Built along the Southern Pacific in the 1880s, Cochise was primarily a water and coal stop near the base of the grade to Dragoon. The old Cochise Country Store dates back to 1913. The nearby Cochise Hotel was owned by John and Lulu Rath, and around the year 1900, you could find Big Nose Kate, widow of Doc Holliday, working here. The famous dentist by day, outlaw gambler, and gunfighter by night died of tuberculosis in 1887, and Big Nose Kate was reportedly by his side. He was 36. Making our way east of Cochise, the railroad continues on the straight and narrow into an alkaline lake in the Sulphur Springs Valley, known as the Wilcox Playa. Covering an area approximately 8 miles wide and 10 miles long, it has the distinction of being the largest dry lake in Arizona. UP 8852 has just passed through the town of Wilcox and sprints westward across the sink. From this angle, you can see the start of the grade to Dragoon. As the train approaches, the engineer notches up the throttle for the 1.36% climb ahead. A grade of less than 1.5% may not seem like anything if you're driving a car, but then again, cars don't weigh 15,000 tons either. This heavy manifest is running with distributed power in a 2x1x1 configuration. As we click off the miles on our eastbound journey across the Lordsburg Subdivision, we come to a town originally named Malley when it was founded in 1880. Although this appeared to be an unlikely place for a town, Malley became a whistle stop on the Southern Pacific since it was roughly the halfway point between El Paso and Phoenix. In 1889, Orlando Wilcox, Union Army general and commander of the Department of Arizona, paid a visit to the small town, which changed its name to Wilcox in his honor. From its humble beginnings, Wilcox became the cattle capital of the nation during its heyday around World War I. This is the birthplace of cowboy actor and singer Rex Allen, who is dubbed the American Cowboy. The Rex Allen Museum is located on Railroad Avenue, just off the main line. You don't have to look very hard to conclude that this was first and foremost a railroad town. Among the historic buildings is the old Southern Pacific Depot. This is not just an old building. This is the only original depot that remains along the Southern Transcontinental Railroad. It was built out of redwood in the winter of 1880-1881, and it is said that many of the original glass windows are still intact to this very day. A few additions were made in the following years, including a Wells Fargo office and freight warehouse in 1895, and a bay window facing the tracks was added in 1910. Today, the Wilcox Depot continues an important role as City Hall. Back in Benson, we saw the San Pedro Valley Railroad handling cars that were interchanged with the UP. The short line also has an interchange here in Wilcox. A newly painted EMD GP15AC number 722 really looks sharp in its green paint. It is one of only 34 GP15ACs built by EMD in the early 80s. 30 went to Mopac, and 4 were exported to Venezuela. This unit began life in November of 1982 as the MP1722. Later it became UPY number 722, so there is definitely armor yellow under that green. More armor yellow approaches us from the east. UP 8220 is in charge of another long train of marine containers for the West Coast. The train passes at restricted speed and soon will be stopping. Back at Fenner, just out of Benson, another westbound has Main 1 plugged for a couple of hours due to mechanical issues. A logjam is starting to form as the dispatcher is forced to run all traffic around it on Main 2. To add to the complications, Amtrak 1 is about 40 minutes behind this train, and the dispatcher wants to take no chances of delaying it. The stack train slows for a red signal just west of town. This train is nearly 3 miles in length, and the crew is aware that they are blocking the only 2 grade crossings in town. To make matters worse, it is almost 5 p.m., and the residents of Wilcox will be going home soon. With no alternative but to stop, the engineer uses up every inch of rail he can in front of the red signal. After a 40-minute wait, the headlight of Amtrak 1 appears in the distance as the westbound Sunset Limited enters a 20-mile section of tangent track through the Sulphur Springs Valley. The dust in the air is mainly from impatient motorists taking dirt roads along the right-of-way to a grade crossing east of town. Trains usually travel a little faster through Wilcox, as UP 6071 demonstrates for us the next morning. East of Wilcox, the railroad climbs out of the Sulphur Springs Valley to another summit at Raso. A yellow carpet of wildflowers covered the desert floor in our springtime visit, and although the clouds didn't cooperate with us, we caught a westbound climbing the 1% grade through Hay Flat Draw toward the summit of Railroad Pass. Continuing east, the railroad grade makes one final dip before climbing to the New Mexico state line near Steins. A closer look at the wildflowers reveal a carpet of California poppies. It was the abundance of desert flowers and the moderate temperatures that guided our decision to shoot the Lordsburg Subdivision in early April, avoiding the monsoon season where this line has earned the moniker the Stormy. A search on the internet will tell you that Bowie, Arizona is an unincorporated community with a population of around 450 people. Like many towns along the line, Bowie is tied to the Southern Pacific, which built through here in 1880. The name comes from Fort Bowie, a U.S. Army outpost near the present-day town of Wilcox. Bowie is located just off of Interstate 10, although not many travelers ever have a reason to venture in. If the town had a claim to fame, it would have to be the Rambo movie series starring Sylvester Stallone. Although no filming was ever done here, Bowie was the hometown of the movie's character, John Rambo. In the real world, Bowie is control point CPS 1098 on the Lordsburg Sub and a junction with the Arizona and Eastern's line to the copper town of Miami. The Arizona and Eastern tracks are in the foreground as UP 5936 sprints west on Main 1. UP 9042 leads an eastbound stack train through Bowie on Main 2. As the stack train clears the crossing, the Arizona and Eastern appears on Main 1, led by 4 ex-Southern Pacific GE B40-8s, painted in the colors of its parent company, the Genesee and Wyoming. Arizona and Eastern serves the copper mining industry in southeastern Arizona, running on 206 miles between Clifton and Miami. The route requires trackage rights on the UP between Lordsburg and Bowie, a distance of 48 miles. This train has just come from Lordsburg with loaded gondolas of copper concentrates from the Morenci mine near Clifton. The AZER also carries hoppers of perlite and copper products including copper rod, anodes, and cathodes. The railroad utilizes a nice collection of vintage 40-foot boxcars of former Southern Pacific, Cotton Belt, Western Pacific, and other fallen flags. Leaving the Lordsburg Sub, the train slowly enters the Globe branch. Once clear of the siding at Bowie, AZER 4012 comes to a stop, while an additional crew member realigns all the switches behind the train. With a company truck safely stowed, he climbs aboard, and the 4 GEs get the train underway on the 135-mile branch line to Miami. This line was built starting in 1895 by the Gila Valley, Globe, and Northern Railway. It came under control of the Arizona Eastern during construction and was completed in 1899. Southern Pacific took control of the railroad in 1905, and the AE was fully merged into the SP system by 1924. In 1988, it was purchased by Kyle Railways, which became States Rail in 1995, and Rail America in 2001. The line was then sold to Permian Basin Railways in 2004 and to the Genesee and Wyoming in 2011. This line has changed hands over the years, but the rails are still polished by steel wheels nearly every day. And that's a good thing. This crew will take the train as far as Safford, where it'll be handed off to a fresh crew for the rest of its journey to Miami. Back on the Lordsburg Subdivision, UP 2616 races west near the old SP station of Olga. The train travels at a good clip, having just dropped down the 1.4% descending grade from the New Mexico border near Steins. Trains enter the state of New Mexico between the control points of Van Ar and Steins. Originally called Steins Pass, named for U.S. Army Major Enoch Steen, who camped near here in 1856 while exploring the recently acquired Gladstone Purchase. That area today makes up southern Arizona and southwestern New Mexico. This became a stop on the Birch Stage Line in 1857, and the community of Steins was founded in 1880 after the arrival of the railroad. The town prospered thanks to the discovery of gold, silver, and copper. The catch was that Steins had no natural source of water. It had to rely on the railroad to bring water, which fortunately had a vested interest. Southern Pacific built a rock crushing plant here in 1905 for making rail ballast, and it operated for the next few decades. The quarry ran until 1944, at which time the shipments of water also came to a stop for Steins. Not wanting to leave the people of Steins high and dry, Southern Pacific offered to move the town's residents elsewhere for free, along with what other items they could carry. Most of the population accepted and left their houses and many possessions behind. 80 years later, many of the houses still stand, although several structures have been consumed by fire after the town was abandoned. A brief detour off of nearby Interstate 10 gives you this view. And this view. Three Norfolk Southern units assist this westbound stack train as it nears the Arizona state line between Steins and Van Ar. The grade down the west side is 1.4%. On a different day, we are in time to catch Amtrak 2 as it overtakes an eastbound autorag train, which is cresting the summit at Steins. The crew must be camera shy as they duck behind the vans. The grade down the east side is 1.5%. It leads down to another playa similar to what we saw west of Wilcox, known as Alkali Flat. On the other side, steel rails curve toward the historic town of Lordsburg before pushing east over the Continental Divide to Deming, leading trains past cinder cones and ancient lava flows on a heading for the Rio Grande, and the eastern end of the Lordsburg Subdivision at El Paso. But that will have to wait until next time. Until then, as always, thanks for watching.